And joining me is three MEPs. We have Sean Kelly, Janice Atkinson and Stephen Wolfe. Let's talk about the French elections. The first round, Macron 24%, Le Pen 21.3%. The polling average from this morning of the five most recent national polls puts Macron at 62% and Le Pen on 38%. Janice, is that polling accurate, do you think? Do you think Le Pen is going to be losing that heavily?
She starts off at 39%, so she's got 2 weeks to prove herself to the French public. We've been here before. Look at Brexit, look at President Trump. Both the UK and the American citizens confounded the polling companies, so they've been rather discredited. I have every hope that Marine can actually turn the electorate around. Mélenchon hasn't come out in support of Macron, but Macron has got the establishment behind him. He's got the support of Mogherini, Juncker, the establishment elite. Marine doesn't. She's just like Brexit, she's just like Mr. Trump in appealing to the ordinary French voters. You know, I'm not the elite candidate, I'm not the former banker, I'm not the person that's come from nowhere. I've actually got a track record of being elected. Monsieur Macron hasn't.
Well, Sean, I mean, one very big difference between Brexit and Trump is that in the European elections so far, which is of course the Dutch elections, Geert Wilders didn't win. This populist rise didn't happen, though some people were fearing that it would. Sean, do you think that Janice is right here? Is Le Pen going to come from 39% to become President Le Pen in just a month's time?
No, I don't think so. I think those opinion polls are reasonably accurate, because you must remember it's much different, for instance, to the United States, where you have two parties, Republican and Democrat. But here in France, you have my own group, the EPP. They're going to back Macron, so probably will the Socialists, and she has a very limited appeal. Also, I think Brexit put the fear of God into a lot of people of what was likely to happen if they too followed that line. So even if she were elected, it wouldn't necessarily mean that France would leave the European Union. I don't think she would actually win a referendum subsequently on that.
Do you think the fact that she stood down as president of the Front National in order to be the president of all of the French people, of all of France, do you think that's going to have any impact on how she's seen when it comes to polling day in May?
I don't think it would make such a big difference. In fairness, she has done much better than you would have thought 5 years ago. But definitely Brexit has given her a little fillip, but I think at the end of the day she will never bridge the gap that's there at the moment, and I think it will be around 60-40 in the end, which is a substantial figure for her, but not enough to get into power.
Stephen, 60-40, is that your guess as well?
I suspect it's probably going to go around that, and Marine Le Pen has shown herself to be a formidable, intelligent politician, not only in terms of her strategy, and her strategy I think is the long-lasting message that comes from this. This is about saying we're no longer a nation of left and right, and you can see that by the fact that the political parties have been in. This is now about those who, the elitists, Europeanists who support a major project, and people who are being left behind and ignored. And there's no doubt about it that Macron is an establishment man. It's been clearly picked out to follow along this kind of tried and tested route that started with Tony Blair, where you choose a good-looking, reasonably telegenic man. They put the same guy in Italy, you know, and only to be voted out recently by the Italians. They put the same guy in charge of the radicals in Greece so that they can carry on that project, and he is exactly of that ilk. No one is actually showing where his money's coming from. For example, he has actually been involved in banking. So he's perfect for all of that, and that's why it fits into this message, I think, for Marine Le Pen, that you're going to get this divide in Europe. But at the same time, we have to be realistic about this. And the realism is exactly what Sean has said. You've got all the major political parties coming behind her. I was, as someone who likes to see the outsiders win, would love to see the situation that Janice talks about. But I've got a feeling here that Europe has managed to secure the lines as they see it against the elites, against the smaller groups. They've beaten them in Holland. They turned back the referendum result in Switzerland. They'll do the same again here.
Janice, just come back on that. Do you accept that, you know, potentially they're going to do the same as they did in the Dutch elections. Le Pen is not going to win. And the EU is not particularly worried because the polls are indicating that Le Pen's not going to win. And so, you know, it's sort of...
The EU are worrying, absolutely. But going back to the Dutch elections, the Prime Minister actually took over a lot of Geert Wilders' agenda. And there was a couple of terrorist atrocities. They've had the Muslim jihadis walking into their country. So therefore, Geert Wilders actually changed the policy, as the FPO did in Austria, etc. So don't they write them off? And who is the official opposition now in the Netherlands? It is Geert Wilders. Now, there is a complete difference between Macron and Marine. Marine is representing the people. She has the agricultural country. He has the cities. And
the polls suggest, though, he has more support. And he is, of course, Macron believes the EU should be at the heart of French politics. There should be more integration
yes,
in
he
terms
does,
of
absolutely.
finance, defence,
They have
migration.
got a big choice. Okay, they've got a very, very stark choice. They can choose more of the EU, they can choose more federalism, or they can choose somebody that actually recognises retaining the culture and identity of France, which is under threat from this place and also under threat from Macron. I mean, Stephen's absolutely right. This guy has been picked out from an early age as that, and as Obama was as well. They go to the right schools, they go to the elite universities. All of a sudden, he ended up in Rothschild's Bank. He wasn't qualified to go to Rothschild's Bank. He ended up in mergers and acquisitions. He didn't have the qualifications to do that. But he earned the money, he made the contacts. And what the French people have really got to ask is, where is the money coming from to actually fund this? And that's the most frightening thing. So he will be the establishment candidate. So if they want more EU, and let's face it, about 40% of the French are now very, very Eurosceptic. Lots of them don't want to be part of this federalist project, the EU. They're a proud nation state. They are a very culturally rich and sophisticated country, and they can risk just wrecking all of this by staying in this place.
At the end of the day, people vote as individuals, and the French people as individuals will want security, they'll want prosperity, they'll want stability, and they will see that more with Macron than Le Pen.
But I don't see
I think
how,
it's a small bit
especially for
disingenuous.
security, Sean.
It's a
I mean,
small
what
bit
he said on
disingenuous to
security.
say that he's been selected as kind of the pin-up guy and that he has nothing else to offer. He is a genuine candidate, the same as anybody else, and at the end of the day, the people of France will have plenty of time to make up their minds about him, and they will vote for either him or Le Pen in their own interest.
Oh, absolutely. But you talk about security. I've heard him say nothing about security. If you stay with him, then you have more open borders, you have Schengen, you have the jihadis slipping through. They've had the most highest number of terrorist atrocities, 250 dead in their country. You go with him, there is a risk of more than that happening. You go with Le Pen, and she will close the borders.
Well, let's bring in Stephen. Stephen, in terms of Brexit, let's bring this back to how this may impact on the UK. What would a President Macron, what would a President Le Pen look like? Surely, in terms of Brexit and the UK post-Brexit, a President Le Pen would be a far more preferable option for the UK.
Well, I think it actually would probably give us some slight advantages, because what you will get with Macron joining in potentially later on this year, Schulz winning in Germany, is this very incredibly unified European Union, which wants then to move even more quickly towards the end project, which is the complete federalism. And we're seeing that through in taxation, extended regulation in financial services, banking union, etc., etc. So all of that will be a greater degree of pressure. And then you can see what's happening here in the European Parliament by those who say that you need to punish the United Kingdom to make sure that no one else, as another country, feels that they could ever get a deal that's good for them if they decided to leave the European Union. Macron will bring that strength of that negative argument, I see, in terms of the way that they treat Britain. Marine Le Pen, I think, will be much more open, because although I agree to an extent with what Sean is saying, I don't think she will end up leaving the European Union. What we will do is try to seek more of what was originally the idea of the European Union, that is bringing more power back to the nation state. She may be more radical, but I don't think the markets are saying that. You see that with the currencies, you see that with the shares. I think at the end of the day, we will have tougher negotiations with a Macron France to that of a Le Pen France.
Sean, is that something you'd agree with? Macron's going to be playing hardball with Britain if he becomes president?
I think the European Union will be negotiating as a team, essentially, and whether it's Le Pen or Macron is not going to make a huge difference. Le Pen obviously would probably be more in line with UKIP and the Brexiters, whereas Macron would be more with the Remainers. But I think, and I hope this won't happen, I don't want to hear any talk about revenge or punishing the Brits. If there is punishment, it will be because Brexit was a mistake, which I think it was a mistake, but not because they would take measures to make the British hurt as a result. And I think over a period of time, the anger that's there at the minute will dissipate and practicality will take over. When we come to the final decisions, which will be about at the earliest probably 5 years' time, then I think socio-economic factors will come into being, trading issues will come into being, and a lot of this will have been water under the bridge, and they'll say, now we have to move forward. This is the reality. The British are leaving. They were here with us for 44 years, so why shouldn't they get preference to a country that was never part of the European Union? I think we have to turn it around in that regard, rather than saying the British are leaving, we must make sure they suffer so no one else will leave.
You could persuade Weber and Verhofstadt and their crew to be able to be a little bit more amenable, haven't we, really?
Yeah,
I think that will happen over time.
Over time.
I think
because obviously we hear talk of Brexit bills, divorce bills. There was talk this week of a fine because of Chinese smuggling into the UK. It seems like very, very hardball and the tactics seem to be quite punishing already. But you're very confident then that there's going to be a turnaround in this two-year negotiating period, and it's going to become far more positive.
It will probably come in the subsequent period, the transition period, I think. But again, it's wrong to say that this is punishment. If the United Kingdom have given commitments, I think it's only right that those commitments should be honoured. That shouldn't be seen as penalising the British. And that is going to be a difficult negotiating position. But I think once the principle is established, we gave commitments, now we're going to honour those commitments. That will make it much easier for everybody.
Dennis, I'll just give you the final word on Le Pen. Isn't it true that whoever becomes president, whether it's Macron or Le Pen, they're going to be completely paralysed unless they, in the parliamentary elections which come afterwards, they get some kind of support and they get a majority which allows them to implement the policies that they want to do. So even if Le Pen is a maverick, is anti-establishment, is going in there to sort out politics in France, if she doesn't have the support from the parliamentary elections, she's not going to be able to do anything.
But we don't know, because that happens 6 weeks after the presidential elections. She's got all her candidates in place. Everybody knows those candidates that are likely to be in her lower chamber. What's Macron got? He doesn't have a single candidate. Where are they going to come from? These are not tried and tested people. We might say, oh, well, I might have Nicolas Sarkozy, or I might have, somebody from the Faux Hollande socialist agenda. He doesn't have any MPs, so she will be able to deliver.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave